Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us for this virtual meeting of the UofL board. As you know, we're meeting this way to try to promote physical distancing and keep everybody safe. A couple of requests before we begin. Please do mute your microphones when you are not speaking, because otherwise it sets off this terrible echo. That's one. And then the second thing is, please do feel free to participate. Even in this particular venue, there's a chat where you can add your comments or, of course, unmute and speak up. I would now like to call roll before we begin. Jake Beamer is very busy controlling multiple laptops as we bring this through live stream. So bear with me as I call roll. If you would indicate that you're present, either on the chat or if Jake can check you off, that'll be great. Tom Andrews. I'll come back to Tom. Larry Benz.
Here.
Beth Boehm.
Present.
Sheldon Bond. Jerry Bradley. I know is here. Ryan Bridgman already called in. Dan Durbin and Ralph I know are here. Andrew Grubb.
Present.
Don Heineken.
Here.
Dennis Heischman.
Here.
Oh, yes, I see. Steve Jones. Tom Meeker.
Here.
Sharon Moore I saw earlier. Jasper Noble. Kayla Payne.
Here.
Sam Rector I saw. Jim Rogers I saw. Shannon Rickett, yes. Shelley Santry. Brad I saw earlier. Karen Turner.
Here.
Michael Moore.
I'm here.
Elaine I saw. And Ron Wright.
Right here.
Wonderful. So did Tom Andrews or Larry Benz join? I think those were the ones we were missing earlier.
Yeah, I'm here.
Larry's on.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Thank you, everybody. Having determined a quorum present, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the UofL Athletic Association. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the January 17, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to approve?
Ralph, so moved.
You have
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Aye. The motion carries. Our next item is the report from our athletic director. I want to say that I am so impressed and so grateful to Vince and the whole team for working through what is a very, very difficult situation. So in support of Card Nation, I'm in my athletics gear today. And Vince, would you please give us your presentation? Once again, everybody, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone.
Thank you, Neely. Yeah, go ahead and update everybody. And there may be some questions along the way. It's certainly been challenging and some crisis management going on from the moment we got notified. I guess it was March 12th, when we were in Greensboro for the men's basketball, ACC basketball tournament, when not only was that tournament canceled, but the NCAA came out and canceled all winter sports and then spring sports activities and championships as well. So it was quite a shocking day, and as we've learned about the global pandemic, a proper decision to make, and we're working through that. I think we've had to make a number of adjustments on campus and off campus as to what's going on. The NCAA has certainly been very active at this time administratively, because with what do you do with the the athletes that lost their spring eligibility there, and then obviously the winter. I would tell you that the winter athletes, the the seniors related to the winter championships were not granted any additional seasons of competition or otherwise. The way the NCAA offered up and we accepted was for seniors in the spring sports to have what's called an additional season of eligibility. And in some cases, it may mean a fifth-year senior who may redshirt due to an injury or what have you, and getting a sixth year to effectively complete their fourth year of academic eligibility if they wanted to. We have around 36 seniors that are in that category. It now looks that we'll probably be around 15 at this moment. It could change one or two, but around 15 of those that would likely come back to compete for another season of eligibility. Track, golf, or primary ones, potentially baseball, depending on what happens with the upcoming Major League Baseball draft. And the impact of that originally we thought may be around $550,000. We today believe it's closer to $300,000 based on the financial aid that they have and any incremental expenses related to them. Keep in mind that the spring sports are predominantly partial scholarship student athletes as well. So it's not a full scholarship across the board for those athletes that come back. And the way the rules work is you're not allowed to increase the amount of aid that they receive. You can give up to that amount or frankly reduce it even down to zero. But our coaches are working with the athletes to talk about their plans moving forward. Many of them are moving on to job opportunities or plan to play professionally or what have you. So they may not be with us, but in Olympic sports is where you may see more activity of them coming back. The other thing is still moving forward with the NCAA, and I've got a call later today, is the name, image, and likeness reform. There's the NCAA is working very quickly with a working group and a lot of input, including from us at the ACC level, about what name, image, and likeness could look like down the road. And at this point, it looks like the NCAA is trying to speed up and get something out there in early 2021 versus waning any later. And then hopefully there'll be states that have already approved legislation around name, image, likeness that would honor whatever date the NCAA looks at to implement any across-the-board changes. But there's going to be an update on that today that I think will have some significance. The other thing is just transfers being immediately eligible. This is a hotly debated topic, and that's happening as well. Whether if a student athlete was to transfer, they'd be immediately eligible if they meet academic criteria and effectively be accepted and released by the two schools. This one is, as I say, I think people have likened it to free agency or what have you. We have a lot of transfers today. There's a number of waivers that are granted, a high number of waivers that are granted when they transfer to give immediate eligibility. And I think this was a way for the NCAA to relax some of the transfer restrictions and still have a waiver process out there if someone has transferred. But let me clarify: you only get one, if you will, free transfer. You can't just transfer every year and move to another school. It would be for underclassmen to take advantage of a one-time opportunity to transfer if they meet the regulations. So there's a lot. I won't go into all the detail today, but that's the one thing I would say is there's a lot of administrative work happening at the ACC and the NCAA level today while we're in a bit of this unusual state related to the pandemic. So it's had its impact in many ways, but that's one way where it's probably favorable, where people are focused on some of these issues. And my guess is those agendas will move along a bit quicker. But, today's environment, as you can tell today, business as usual involves words like Teams and Zoom and WebEx and FaceTime and even Facebook. Last night is the Fellowship of Christian Athletes hosted their annual Night of Champions on Facebook Live. So it certainly posed a different forum. But I will tell you that after the first week or two, and I can speak for 3 students in my household that are doing education online, that they've adapted. I wouldn't say it's ideal, but they've certainly adapted. And I would say the same for our student athletes and staying in touch with their head coaches and coaching staff. Recruiting has taken on the same light because there's a dead period imposed by the NCAA through May 31st. So that means no official or unofficial visits on campus. That means we're doing it all just like this. So when I talk to student athletes, and I've got one tomorrow night that I'll be doing recruiting tomorrow night at 7:00, and it'll be on Zoom. So that's what they're more accustomed to, and you certainly got to get comfortable with that. But anyways, I would say that there is a lot happening. And we'll report more on these things come to a head, but I think for now we're in pretty good shape. Internally, we've certainly done our own adjustments, and I'm very happy with our senior team. We were quick to get on the changes. Maybe it is my business experience being around crisis management and economic unrest, but we were quick. Right after the announcement of the NCAA to start thinking about our finances and where things were and starting to make adjustments right away and thinking ahead and forecasting a new way, not just for the fiscal year 20, but the fiscal year 21. And we'll get into that in a minute as I'm going to have Jeff Spelker update on fiscal year 20, which we're holding together quite nicely. But it certainly, I would also tell you that this was going to be one of the best years we've ever experienced, and we were certainly doing it in the classroom, athletically, community service, all the things I've spoke of in the past, and financially. So it's certainly disappointing not to get to finish off this fiscal year and bring home a terrific positive on the bottom line, but also hopefully championships that we had some teams competing for. As far as the student athletes, we're staying in close touch with them. The NCAA has relaxed the rules a bit, so those that have hardships or in need, we have a little bit of flexibility in terms of helping them out with meals or housing. We've probably got around 30 athletes still on campus and housing. You can have hardship situations where they could stay in their dorm and do that. We have 78 athletes that are international and just over another 100 that are Pell Grant eligible. So we've come across hardships, and I think we've done a terrific job dealing with all those individual situations individually and putting them in a safe place if they're here on campus or around the community, and certainly making sure they're being taken care of from every facet to include mental health, because this has their own strain on them if they're unable to even go home and visit with family should they be an international student athlete. So as far as facilities go, we're closed everywhere except the training rooms. If they're rehabbing an injury, we'll take care of them. But otherwise, everything is closed down, and very few people on campus, as you can imagine. It's it's pretty much a ghost town. From our head coaches, we're staying in regular contact with them, providing a lot of guidance from the conference and NCAA, as well as answering any questions related to their staff, as much as the student athletes. They've done a terrific job helping in the community outreach, personal service announcements. They've been involved in community service, continuing to. We have student athletes reading books online to Jefferson County Public Schools. We have head coaches doing community service outreach online. Donations. Our staff's been very generous. Today, I think Coach Satterfield's supplying some Jimmy John's sandwiches to some of our healthcare workers. Lori and I sent down a couple hundred meals from Texas Roadhouse and some desserts from Homemade Pack Kitchen last week to everyone across our healthcare facilities, from research through Jewish to Fraser to UofL hospitals. So I think our group is really engaged with that and doing all they can. And we've also created an emergency fund for some of the employees in the athletic department in the same vein that we have one on campus for all employees, and they're still eligible for that one. But we knew there'd be a lot of need being created, so we've created a secondary fund to that as well. From a marketing standpoint, we're trying to do all we can to help with the academic side of the house. We've Lottie Stockwell in our marketing department has helped admissions with a virtual tour for potential new students. Working with Michael Wade Smith on some initiatives in marketing. We've got our campaign out that We Rise as One that we've had, and we certainly have accentuated that over the last 5+ weeks, and we'll continue to and push on that. But a lot to take in. We've made a lot of decisions. It's been some long days. You think about not being in an office, but we're generally still have very long 10+ hour days working on this. And I can tell you from the budget standpoint, we're working 7 days, trying to make sure we got that buttoned up, as we have a due date coming up on Friday for that. On the athlete front, we did have, there's still exciting news going on. We had the WNBA draft this week, and Jasmine Jones was selected in the first round, 12th pick by the New York Liberty, so she can join Asia Dewar. And then the very next pick, the 13th pick, was Kylie Shook from our team to also with the New York Liberty. So we've got a lot of red in New York representing the New York Liberty now, and we're excited for them. That's those two individuals I've known throughout their career, and they have really worked hard to improve their game to get to that level. So it's exciting to see where they are, and kudos to Coach Walls and the program for what's going on there. Certainly disappointing they didn't get to contend for a national championship at the end, but hopefully this is a little bit of sweetener for those two. We have the NFL draft this week, and there's certainly a lot of recognition around Mekhi Becton and being a potential top 10 pick. From all things we hear, we expect that to still happen. And a number of teams have been in touch with Coach Ledford, Coach Satterfield, and we certainly wish him the best in the draft this week. He's potentially going to be the highest drafted player we've had come out of Louisville. With baseball, it's unusual with our draft. Normally, we think about 8 to 10 of our players leaving every year, but the Major League Baseball is considering a truncated draft where they may be as low as 5 rounds. And the implications of that is that it may impact what I mentioned earlier on the seasons of eligibility being extended. We may see some of our juniors or seniors maintain their eligibility and stay with us. If that's the case, our preseason #1 team may be unbelievable next year, but we'll still have some kids, I'm sure, get drafted or maybe leave as a free agent. Reed Detmers, our All-American pitcher, is still projected to be a top 10 pick, and don't expect that to change. The start of his season was amazing. He was more like top 1 pick the way he started the season. So we're excited about the opportunity to see what happens with the Major League Baseball draft. As it gets to the finances, Jeff is going to take you through our fiscal year 20, give you an update on that. We've certainly had to make a number of adjustments and budgets related to the decision to cancel all the sporting activities. And as mentioned, we jumped on it quickly, restricting spending on equipment, projects, travel, a variety of things, team travel as much as administrative travel. And we've been able to recoup a number of dollars to offset the reduced distribution from the NCAA and ACC. So, Jeff, do you want to take us through that? And then I'll, after he's done, I can talk about the fiscal year 21 budget as well.
Sure. Thanks, Vince. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's staying healthy during this trying time. I'm going to try to keep this brief. I'm going to start on page 2 of our statements. That's the revenue side. So overall, through March, our operating revenue is about $81 million compared to about $87 million last March. That's about a $6 million decrease from the prior year, but that's mostly due to the decrease in football guarantees and one less football and basketball game. So that's pretty much the driver of that decrease on the operating. Just kind of going through the lines. Ticket sales across all sports have been really strong. Looking at football, we exceeded budget for the year. We also saw an uptick in our concessions revenue, so football came in strong on the revenue side. Moving down to the stadium, Cardinal Stadium, we were about $976,000 through March. It's about $700,000 higher than last year. Most of that was due to the new line of caboose rentals. And then we also were collecting tickets we had ticket sales for the Rolling Stones concert. unfortunately, with the pandemic, the Rolling Stones did cancel, so we're now starting to work through refunds. So we anticipate that number to decline over the next month. Skipping down to the men's basketball. Men's basketball was on track, on budget for ticket sales and suites. Concessions and advertising were also right in line with budget. We'll be settling up on the concessions and advertising with the arena this month. But the numbers do look pretty promising. In the men's basketball, the one line that will be impacted is that ACC and CA line. You've been reading about that in the paper. We collected about $134,000 through March, which was solely for the ACC tournament. With the cancellation of the tournament, we have been working through refunds on that, so that 134 will diminish on the line. About $1.8 million of that budget is for the NCAA Men's Basketball Championship. Again, that will be impacted as well, and we're supposed to get more guidance from the conference here in the coming weeks on what the final distribution will be. And that final ACC distribution normally comes in June. Skipping down to the women's basketball revenue, their continued success on the court. You can see it in the numbers on the revenue side. Ticket sales exceeded budget, and we're over 40,000 from last year. And I think we even had one less game than last year. So ticket sales are really strong this year. And just glancing at the concession revenue, that's going to exceed budget by quite a bit as well. So, Jeff and the team does really well, not only court, but they also have a very significant impact on our financials. So that was a positive area as well. Skipping down to the other Olympic sports, the ticket sales for most of our sports were at or exceeding budget. We're the one thing that we had to cancel the baseball season because of the COVID-19. So that line will probably be under budget as we process the refunds. On those refunds, though, we did offer our season ticket holders the option to either roll those into their football season or go ahead and apply that and give it back to the baseball program. And actually, about a quarter of the fans did decide to give back to the baseball program or roll the revenue into their tickets for next year on football side. So not all that revenue was completely lost in our statements. Moving on down to the marketing. Outside of marketing, all our other revenue sources at the bottom of page 2 should be right at budget. We are monitoring the marketing line, though, because to see what the impact of the COVID-19 will be on our merchandise and sales. We should get our next check here probably in about a couple of weeks, so we don't anticipate much of a decline on that March payment or the April payment, but we do anticipate a decline on that fourth quarter payment, which should come in June. So that's the one line we're really monitoring at this point, which is a lot of uncertainty right now. So to date, we've realized about 75% of our anticipated revenue, and we still have a couple large payments out, like I mentioned, the ACC, and then we also have that the royalties for the IMG CLC for merchandise sales. So let's see, with the events over the past month, we do anticipate being under budget for the year. It's right now, it's very fluid. Hard to put a number on it, but we do anticipate being under budget. However, as Vince alluded to, we've taken several steps on the expense side to mitigate the shortfall, and I'll get into those here shortly. So does anybody have any questions on the revenue side? Okay. If there's no questions, we'll turn on to page 3 now on the expenses, and I'm just going to go high level here. And our operating expenses through March are $81.4 million. This is up slightly from $80.9 million last year. A lot of this increase is related to the bowl game. We didn't have a bowl game in the prior year, so about $1.9 million of additional expense was related to the bowl game. And then we also had $2.6 million cash transfer in our contingency line for the contractual obligation of our former head football coach. If you skip down the bottom, you can see, as Vince mentioned, we were having a really strong year prior to this pandemic. If you just look at our net revenues, through March, we were at $7.7 million. Compared to a deficit of 7.5 last year. So we were really having a really strong year. Everything was coming in budget until through March. So looking ahead, we do anticipate expenditures to drop significantly in the last quarter due to this pandemic. We've had savings in travel, meals, recruiting, and all of our administrative lines. These savings will offset reductions in revenue discussed earlier. In addition, on March 16th, we took several immediate actions on the expense side to mitigate the shortfall, and try to preserve our cash position. Some of these actions include reduced all the procurement card limits to minimal levels, and I'm monitoring all expenses on a daily basis to ensure that nothing that's all essential expenses at this point. We also froze all of our travel cards, and we suspended all travel, and we worked diligently to secure refunds and credits on trips already booked. I can't say enough about our Anthony's travel staff, who did a tremendous job working through all those trips and getting credits, which will help us in the following year. And the final thing that we did is we instituted a hiring freeze on all positions. We basically said limited hiring to only essential positions. And so with these changes, we anticipate it'll enable us to end the year in a very strong financial position as we prepare for an uncertain fiscal year 21. So does anybody have any questions? I know that was kind of quick. Okay, if not, thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Jeff,
Yes.
1 second. I'm going to remind people that if you want, you can type a question in the chat feature as well. So Jeff, go on, but it's just a reminder to people that they can do that as well.
Okay, and I can always answer anything that comes in through the chat.
So I'll take it from here on the financial side. As Jeff mentioned, I think the highlight of things we're waiting for at this point, and I think we have a rough, or I should say, a pretty good idea around the NCAA/ACC distribution. All schools in the ACC receive the same amount. The variable there is that, and I'm on a subcommittee of the ACC as well, working on this, but we're looking to reduce cost at the ACC level. So, talking about the actual conference expenses, whether it be related to seminars, spring meetings, a variety of they have mental health summits, anything that we can cancel, postpone, get credits for, et cetera. Every dollar of that obviously goes back and gets split amongst the conference members. And there's been a pretty aggressive run on those to cut it as many expenses as possible. There's Whit Babcock at Virginia Tech and Dan Radakovich at Clemson are on that subcommittee with me working through the conference level expenses. I think you can get a gist from Jeff and I that, we were pretty excited about where we were financially, and it was really going to be helpful because as we look ahead to next year, we knew it was going to be probably more of a challenge than this year. We certainly have the liabilities continuing related to Coach Petrino and have a liability related to the stadium and naming rights payment. And we were planning on building up a nice buffer coming out of this year to help on some of those one-time expenses and versus the operating expenses. But with that being said, we've gone through some pretty detailed review of our revenue budget for next year and trying to think about where we think things will be, even if we were to play football. If it were to start in October or November at a later date, we've gone through from suites to premium club seats to season ticket holders, switching to single game ticket sales, parking, concessions, all those line items for football. We've looked at what it might mean to donations if the economic impact is as strong as what's being forecasted on our individual donors and season ticket holders. Marketing, there's certainly not a lot of retail open today. Any retail open today selling collegiately licensed product, we know we're going to take a hit there. Corporate sponsorships potentially being idle. There's a variety of things, but in the end, it comes up to approximately $15 million that of a delta that we've got to go solve for. And these have been very difficult meetings. I'd say also very productive. This is something that college athletics has been immune to some degree, is these kind of economic challenges. They don't move around as much with the price of commodities, but this is an unusual one in a pandemic virus hitting. So with that being said, we were quick, as Jeff noted, right away that following Monday, March 16th, started looking at all of our expenses, not just for that current fiscal year, but looking ahead to our business model for fiscal year 21. We started with the revenue, so we knew where that would guide us to the expenses. And we moved over to the expenses and started with some more notable things that you've read about, and that being salary concessions for fiscal year 21, where all head coaches have conceded on 10% reduction in salaries. We've had senior staff. I've got 12 senior staff members that have all conceded 10% of their salaries for fiscal year 21. I've conceded 10% of my salary, and then am surrendering this year's and next year's bonus opportunities. It's 150,000 each year. That's another 300, and then I'll kickstart the emergency staff assistance fund with a $10,000 donation to for those that may need it in a time of need. So that we started in the salary component of it, of the higher level compensation. We've certainly gone through an assessment of where our staffing is. We've communicated with our staff about that, and that's not enough to resolve our shortfall, that we've dipped into the sport budgets, and we're roughly 15% cuts in the sport budgets. And we've got a variety of other sport cuts in administrative support, whether it be donor events, ticket holder events, it could be professional development, whatever it might be. We've got a variety of line items that we've gone through and cut back. And then we did announce to our staff that on this Wednesday, we will formally announce what our plans are related to any furloughs or reduction in force. And that's still the plan. We've worked long and hard on that. There'll be communication on that Wednesday, and that would be in preparing for our budget submittal on Friday, the 24th. So a lot happening. As Jeff mentioned, we're already in a bit of a rhythm and cost savings on sitting on a variety of things. As I mentioned earlier, the projects, capital projects, travel, team travel, that may be modified as we get into these sport budgets. But I can't say enough about how supportive everyone has been. I mean, really has, across the board, with head coaches and our senior staff. And it's we regret that we have to make some of these very difficult decisions. But for us to be honest to the situation and where we are as an athletic department, we're not sitting with a large reserve as some may be, and certainly the university shouldn't be held to hold us up during this process of where we are. The big outlier is football. When and if football will begin and play. And I think there's a lot of discussion going on in contingency planning now that the NCAA has worked past and the ACC has worked past many of these legislative points that I mentioned earlier. Now everybody's getting pretty focused on thinking about parallel paths for the football season and potentially when it could start and what the duration of the season would be, number of games, et cetera. I think you'll see more come out of that in the next couple weeks. There's a tendency to have things leak, which is one reason I think you'll see some of it. And I do think there's some really productive meetings going on behind the scenes in private. So, the if situation is big, if there wasn't football, and I think that's why our budget is not as I should say we don't have quite the sport concentration as maybe some of the large football, quote unquote, football schools or the SEC, where you're in the 70 to, LSU just won the national championship, reported 85% of their athletic budget comes from football. And ours is not near that amount. As you can imagine, we've been in the 40 to 45%, range as we look at where football is and hopefully be able to resolve some of these things coming forward. But with that, I'm going to open it up to some questions and hear what others might have at this point.
Vince, I see a question from Tom Baker. And please read out the question.
Yeah, so the question for Tom is, what basic assumptions are you making on people in the stands for football and basketball? And, my view has been that it's hard for me to see sports continue or going on with nobody in the stands. And I know that's being discussed, but it's just symbolic that the problem's not resolved or we're not heading in the right direction. I think that my assumption on this is that we won't begin until we see a significant, heading towards a major decline. If we don't have a vaccine, I think that makes it more difficult to start up. But there's a lot unknown right now. I know there's a lot of work going on, but my belief, or I would think if I've put my viewpoint out there nationally, is that we won't be playing games with empty stands. I'm sure the TV would appreciate that because there'd be a lot of viewers watching it. Maybe it'd help their ad sales, but for us, I just don't foresee that happening, and that's why we started to look at the budget. That two things in our assumptions around ticket revenue for football primarily. We have some of this roll over to basketball too. Is if there really are 45 million Americans filing for unemployment, it's going to have an economic impact on them and their ability to maintain their discretionary spend on sporting activities. Two is I think there is a social or socio impact of what's happening with this virus, that people may want to make certain that the quote unquote the coast is clear before they queue up in a long ticket line at a gate at our football stadium or any football stadium across the country, because they're more spread out tailgating than they are standing in an entry gate, and that's where we're having to think about accommodations for hand sanitizers and proper spacing inside the stadium as much as we can, albeit seats are elbow to elbow.
I'd like to note that Dr. Ron Wrights joined us as well. And are there any other questions? If not, once again, we'll give you a minute, but please do mute yourself if you're not speaking now.
Hello, this is Shelley Santry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Shelley.
I know that everyone's thinking it. I just want to say it. Super appreciate everything you've done, the sacrifice that you've made and your staff. It's really, really unbelievable. And hopefully there's a day where we can get back to normal and make it up.
That'd be terrific. As Neely knows, as in our staff, I've told them this too. We really have been a leader in many ways, and we've been a focus of a lot of the national media, but also just of helping other schools that have not been through this. I can't tell you how many one-on-ones I've had with other ADs, the Power 5 schools and even non-Power 5, and holding roundtables about what Louisville's doing and how we approach the situation and in particular our finances.
Vince, this is Tom again. As a follow-up to the initial question, let's assume for the moment that a vaccine is not readily available or ubiquitous until a year from now. Under your analysis, that would mean that there would be no sports during the 21 season for any sports. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think if there wasn't, I still think based upon what you're seeing now, Tom, from Washington and elsewhere, that they're already starting about some dates to relax. I just don't know if it's going to be relaxed enough for people to be elbow to elbow. I mean, Florida governor opens up Jacksonville, allows the beaches to get reopened, and Jacksonville opens, and they're under a lot of scrutiny for that. But people were social spacing on the beach. We don't have that ability in a stadium to social distance when their seats are right up against each other. So I think, that as I mentioned, it's interesting because as I think about the revenue play in this, our ACC network is not tied necessarily to advertising sales, it's tied to distribution. So it's number of households. If we were to play in front of no stands, there'd probably be a big boom, a turnaround for ESPN and others for selling advertisement because people were up watching the TV versus sitting in the stands. So they're going to be certainly pushing to have games go on, I would think. But I just don't see I don't see that until this quote unquote curve has been flattened nationally, not just in Louisville, Kentucky, but nationally, where collegiate sports under one full umbrella would be allowed to go. And when I listen to Dr. Brian Hainline of the NCAA, I wouldn't say he's the most encouraging that this is going to be open for business as right on time in the fall.
So
there's another question, Vince. I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
You wouldn't consider, or you've decided, I should say, that empty stands and just television and any sports, particularly the basketball and football, you just wouldn't do that. And
I think it'll happen. I think I'm just saying, if it goes long enough, I think you'll see something happen there. It's just my personal opinion, but when President Trump has called all the professional commissioners of the leagues together and Mark Emmert of the NCAA and has a discussion and starts talking about what it's going to take to get things back on track and open them up, it's clear there's going to be a push. I just think that we're not there on understanding the safety precautions that will need to take place for those to re-enter the stadiums. Competitions will probably, our entrepreneurial spirit will figure it out.
If you didn't have people in the stands, what I'm hearing is you're suggesting that we wouldn't have sports. We wouldn't play to empty stands and just televise. Racing, there are several operations that are still going on, and it's been a boon for them. Notwithstanding the fact there's nobody in the stands. Fox is doing great guns because there's just so little product out there, and I would think at some point the NC2A is going to say, just like golf is going to do, playing to empty tournaments, that you all would say, okay, fine, we'll play football to empty stands. But my question would be, if it isn't safe for the patrons to come in, what about our young student athletes who are out there sweating and, doing all that? So
that's been my point, Tom, in these discussions. And, and when we get with other ADs and roundtables is just, if it's, the ability to test them all. I know there's this notion that you could test every athlete before you get into the competition, but let's make sure we have plenty of tests. And then how often do you test? Are you talking about testing every day before practice? I mean, there's a number of precautions I don't think that have been developed yet enough for me to give you an educated opinion on it. But I could, when you start talking about putting kids out there or any athletes out there to play physical sport where there's touching, I would think you'd want to make sure that you've got the ability to take their temperature or take their test on a regular basis to make sure they truly are safe to get out there before they put them at risk.
Right.
And there's one more question about, are we able to honor scholarships for incoming freshmen while some seniors are returning for an extra year? That's from Eric Benson.
Yeah, Eric. So we have, we went through this discussion as if, whether we should first understand what's the economics of that, knowing that these are partial scholarship seniors that are coming back. And that's where I mentioned earlier, we think the exposure is around $300,000. And our senior team was pretty committed to make sure we could avail that $300,000 for those student athletes to finish their career as they so choose. And have had those conversations with them. So we still are able to honor the scholarships coming in. The way it works is the NCAA, for example, in baseball has a limit of 11.7 scholarships. If these seniors who were planning on leaving come back and let's say they have 2 scholarships, but amongst them, that it would now be 13.7 for this 1 year. You would get to add their scholarship on top of the 11.7 that would be for the rest of the roster. And then they've relaxed the roster size, which in baseball, you can use your 11.7 scholarships towards 27 players, but have a roster of 35 with obviously the others being walk-ons. And they've relaxed the roster size to accommodate the number of seniors that would come back as well. So financially, we've planned for it. That those incremental student athletes coming back are going to frankly provide incremental revenue to the university as well, because we're only paying a partial of that scholarship. They're still going to be paying tuition and room and board and all the things that go on here as far as being a student athlete. But we were committed to find the dollars and cut other things to make sure we could accommodate them.
Please feel free, if there are no questions now, if you want to bring them up later, please do reach out to any one of us. I'm going to give it another minute, Vince.
Okay.
If not, all right. Everybody, once again, please mute yourself. I feel like a broken record on this. Some of the young people have no idea what that reference means, but I'm hoping a few of you remember broken records. So please do put yourselves on mute. The next item is a report from the president. So I thought I would give you just a quick overview of what we are doing at the university overall, athletics and beyond. As I look at how I spend my day, I would say it probably falls into one of 5 buckets. One is the teaching and learning side. I would call it the instruction mission. And as you know, our chief academic officer is Dr. Beth Boehm. And in that space, again, I have to say that the University of Louisville, you should be very, very proud. We truly were leaders across the nation in quickly moving our courses online, in quickly saying that for the spring semester, we would move to a pass-fail policy. So that's something that I'm pleased that we're at the forefront and people are reaching out to us for guidance on how we've made that move, what our learnings are, etc. When we think about our teaching and learning mission, I will tell you that one thing we know about our university is that we have a very high percentage of students who are Pell eligible. You've heard me talk about how we are one of, in athletics, as we talk about D1, D2, in research, we are also an R1 university, one of only 130 now across the United States and Canada. But when it comes to our teaching and learning mission, a typical R1 will have less than 10% of their students who are Pell Grant eligible. Us, we have 40% of our students who fall into that category and a good 20% who are barely above. And that means anything that we do, Beth and the whole team have had to be very conscious of the digital divide and how do we make sure people have access to online instruction and wireless hotspots, and what do we do? Our needs are very, very great in this area. That's what I wanted to remind you of. But we've done it. We actually took all of our courses online in the space of 4 days, and that's an extraordinary achievement. And I am so thankful to our faculty for all the extra work that they had to do to put that in. So that's one area. A second area that I focus my attention on would be research. Again, our research, I hope you're following. It should give you all a great sense of pride, whether it's our speed school, where not only are they 3D printing our PPE, the personal protective equipment, they've also come up with technology to sterilize and be able to reuse those N95 masks that we've heard so much about. But it's also our School of Communication that said, got faculty, staff, and students engaged in a cards covered campaign. So it's all about wearing a mask and how do you get that word out. And most importantly now, I'd like to call out 2 areas of research. One is our Center for Infectious Diseases. Thanks to the incredible work of Dr. Julio Ramirez and his team, we were the university, we were the hospital that was providing testing, not just for our own hospital, but for 12 area hospitals. We were doing all of the testing. And now beyond that, I'm really, really proud of our Center for Predictive Medicine that Ken Palmer, Dr. Palmer, and his associates run. And in fact, we had the opportunity to work with the Envirome Institute, our own Christina Lee Brown Envirome Institute, again at the University of Louisville, where we've launched the Community Co-Immunity Project. It's the realization that it's not enough if one group, one particular segment of the population is healthy. We're all in this together. It's co-immunity. So that particular project is truly one of its kind, because what we are able to do is in partnership with all hospitals in Louisville, our own hospitals, Norton, Baptist, our researchers, our scientists are testing them for antibodies. And well, a lesson that I've just learned that I can pass on to you. It's not enough if you have antibodies. If you do, it says you were exposed to the disease. But it's also checking the titer. Do you have enough of the neutralizing antibodies? Harvesting it for plasma so that that can then be given, the convalescent serum could be given to our sickest patients. So that's something else that's happening here. And I think we definitely will be among the very first in the country where it's a citywide initiative. And if it works, we start with our healthcare workers and really the entire community. So Tom Maker, back to even your questions earlier about when will we be able to play, what will we be able to do, it'll depend on vaccines and even on antibody testing, how quickly we're able to come up with something that treats the most critically ill patients. So that's a second bucket. The third area is athletics. And it's interesting, the ACC presidents, we have been meeting so regularly, including over the weekend conversations exactly on these topics, as well as thinking about the future of sports and what is the role of the ACC, how do we get stronger. So we have been spending a lot of time, and I know I'll be taking a more active role in the years to come within the ACC. So that's a third area. The fourth area where I spend my time is really on our health sciences. And I want to really thank many people who helped us get to the point where we were able to acquire the Louisville-based assets of Kentucky One Health. Tom Meeker's here, so I do want to call out Tom as well as many others that really helped us get to that decision, because I shudder to think of what would have happened in this community if we had lost those hospital beds and, just as importantly, healthcare providers. They're doing an incredible job. Our 10,000 employees, we really are most impressed with the hard work that they're putting in. The fifth area, I would say, is really trying to work with our local, state, and federal leaders so that we can make sure, as they are thinking about stimulus packages and thinking about how to keep us whole, we make a case for higher education in general and for the University of Louisville in particular. So these are the 5 areas: the teaching and learning mission, our research mission, thinking through our athletics, thinking through our health sciences complex, as well as broader relationships with the university. I'm going to make a couple more comments and then answer any questions you have. Jake, I would like you to pull up the COVID-19 webpage if you have it handy. So this is one way that I'm trying to keep you updated on everything that's happening. I hope the UofL board is not feeling overwhelmed, but anything that I send to one board, I'm trying to send to all of these boards so that you know what is going on. So please check that website for any additional information. Thank you, Jake. And one request of all of you is, as you know, fans of a sport, as Vince said, if they would consider, instead of asking for a refund, it's a sunk cost, if they would donate it back to that program, it would be very, very, very helpful to us. And similarly, anything you can do to show your school spirit now. So please, our UofL merchandise, anything you can do would be most appreciated. And we certainly have our student emergency fund and our staff emergency fund as well. So I would say, overall, we are working hard, but I'm so proud of this team. I have to tell you that it's sometimes hard to believe it's not been 2 years since I've been here. It's not, it's like 23 months. We've gone through a lot, and this has been an unbelievable team, how hard they're working. And I'm very grateful to Vince and to the leadership team in athletics. They've all really kept the university front and center, never forgetting it's the student athlete. So I'm going to wait and see if there are any questions.
Tom has one, Neely, in the chat line about fall semester and more online or students on campus. And
That's a good, yeah, glad to talk.
You can chime in on that. I know from the AD, but I think it'd be good for you from the campus CEO.
Glad to do that. I would say that we definitely, there's each university is trying to decide. But at this point, if you were to ask me or to ask Beth, I would say that we are fully expecting that we will be on in person for the fall. I see today, if you were to ask me, summer, we were quick to move courses online, and I'm glad we did. Part of it was to take away the stress for students and for faculty who are planning. But right now, we think it may be a hybrid model. What we are concerned about is we may start in person, but let us say with the flu season, there's some kind of a spike again, then we'll have to be ready. We have to be very nimble. So right now, we think we will be in person, but we are prepared to be hybrid. I see one more question. Larry, let me take a look at it. Was there any credit or refunds for room or board generally? And did any of this impact athletics? I will speak overall and then turn it over to Vince. Yes, a big hit to the university. We've had a pretty significant hit. And I would say they would fall into tuition dollars, who's going to be enrolling, what will happen, refunds on housing that we've had to do, and then of course our revenues, not just in athletics, but in medicine and dentistry, for example, where all elective procedures were halted. And so that meant that we lost significant revenue there. But Vince, would you speak to specifics about athletes in terms of credits or refunds?
Yeah, I think on that, Larry, as you know, that we pay the full boat on tuition, whether it be in-state, out-of-state. Obviously, tuition, there's no credit back because they're completing their courses online, so there wouldn't be there. But as it relates to housing and meals, we're athletics falls in line with the rest of the payer base of students, being the student athletes. And as you know, many of our student athletes, we have about 295 scholarships, but we've got around 650 athletes. So there's a number of them that we're constantly updating on the credits and how they'll be utilized. If they're a senior, they can apply for a check. If they're an underclassman, it would go as a credit towards future semesters unless that something changes there, and it's a bit of a retention to keep them to come back too. But there are some, there are some credits to be had related to housing and food, but it is, I would say it's minimal.
Vince,
yeah, Lane.
This is Elaine. Wondering how our student athletes are signing up for summer. Do we have pretty good enrollment for summer? We usually have a very large scholarship budget for summer, and I know we had to cut it. So how's enrollment looking?
Yeah, we're a little down on that because some of them, frankly, Elaine, if they're on campus, it's an easy way to get them on campus to get them in class. Marvin's working with all the athletes, whether they're incoming or not, on availing them summer credits. Where most are going to take probably 3 hours instead of 6. I think that's what you're seeing is, some are dropping back a bit on some of their summer credit hours. And it doesn't put, one thing that this as well as anyone on the phone, it's not necessarily putting them back in their on pace to graduate, because most of, like football, most of our student athletes graduate in 3.5 years. We had 31 graduates played in the bowl game in Nashville. So we do a great job getting the student athletes in early, particularly freshmen on baseball, and getting them started on online courses. But as of right now, we are going to see a slight decrease, but we are still pushing forward in summer school. And going back to Tom's point, there is parallel pathing on housing. Should that happen, should things really improve, Most of the schools in the ACC, the athletic directors are talking about if things were to improve, when would we be ready? And I think for us, we think about it we have 3 summer school 1, 2, and 3. Summer school 3 starts July 8th. That would be the earliest we'd think about if things were quote unquote going back to normal. That'd be the earliest time frame we've even talked about having student athletes back in housing.
Thanks.
The one thing we didn't mention is summer camps, which are revenue for the head coaches, not so much the athletic department, but those have been idle. We've canceled all the camps through June, and then we're going to play it by ear on any possibility of camps in July or up until school starts in the fall.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, if not having any other business to come before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
This is Elaine. I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
There's a second.
Great. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any discussion? We are adjourned. Everybody, thank you for joining us in this novel forum. And I'm so glad the technology gods smiled on us today. We've had mostly no problems.